People have been asking me if I'm gonna play inzoi this week, if I'm gonna try inzoi out, if I'm gonna make an inzoi video, and I'm not planning on playing inzoi, at least right now. I could totally change my mind on this in the future, but I thought that I would make a video about this just because people have been asking me this question, and every time I try and answer the question and like my reasons why and everything, I realize that this is like a really big discussion for me. Like, it's actually so much more than just inzoi. And so while I'm gonna talk about why I'm not playing inzoi in this video, I'm gonna talk about a lot of other stuff too. And you'll find throughout this whole process that I actually end up critiquing EA in this video probably a lot more than I'm going to critique Crafton. Because people get really up in arms about this, and I honestly don't really get completely why. And I think it's interesting because I think people are really excited that there is a big challenger in the market to EA and the Sims franchise. I think it is only a good thing that other kind of life simulators are coming up right now and kind of trying to be an actual competitor to the Sims franchise. A monopoly is like never a good thing, and I'm never going to be on the side of a monopoly, so I think it is like only good things that games like inzoi and Paralives and, for a brief moment, Life by You. And I think it's cool that inzoi has kind of come to fruition so quickly. I'm really excited about Paralives. I know that they're a very small development team. Like, I'm always gonna support small dev teams over big giant ones. I think one of my favorite games ever is Software Inc., which for the longest time was made by one guy. And then eventually he brought on a second person to do the art. And that was the last that I knew about the game, was that it was made by two people. And I think it's one of the most well-rounded, fleshed out, like, simulator management games that I've ever played. But I understand that these small development teams can't really be big actual competitors to EA, at least most of the time. I'm not going to say that definitively. I just know the reality is that EA has such more resources, and so a bigger company like Crafton is much more suited to kind of go up against EA. So I do think it is like only a good thing. And I also, at the front of this video, want to acknowledge my bias as a Sims YouTuber. I make videos primarily about The Sims 4, but sometimes other Sims games in the franchise. And I can't speak for other creators, but I can speak for myself. I have a pretty small YouTube channel here. For me, this is a hobby. I don't super monetize my channel. I'm not in the EA Creator Network. I do not have an affiliate code. I do not get early access to make early access videos with the game, nor do I wish to. I don't get any packs for free, and I'm not bringing this up to be holier than thou. I just see this notion sometimes that anybody critical of Crafton or inzoi in any type of way is like shilling for EA or just making money off of The Sims 4, and so they don't want another challenger to The Sims 4. And while I have a channel that hinges on, a simulation franchise, I do think ultimately that better Sims games would only kind of benefit my channel as, my enjoyment of them, but also just my ability to do what I normally do on this channel, which is like detail, lore, realism, that kind of thing. But I also don't say that to say that I'm completely unbiased here. Like, I am a Sims channel, I make Sims content, so, there is a certain soft spot in my heart for The Sims as a franchise. That's the franchise I grew up on, and as much as I'd like to think that I, am super cool and I have no brand loyalty, like, I definitely do feel a little bit of identity with The Sims. So I'm going to be the first to admit that. A while back, when people first started to describe their trepidation for inzoi, they cited a lot of the generative AI stuff and the fact that inzoi is utilizing generative AI within their game kind of to source images for patterns on t-shirts or create objects in the game. I don't know exactly explicitly what methods Crafton uses for the generative AI in their game. They have come out and said that it is sourced all from copyright-free material or kind of in-house design stuff, so it's all, quote, like, ethical. And that's what they've kind of said about it. And I just want to give a background on why people were mad about generative AI to begin with, like, before this whole statement. So I'm not saying that inzoi participates in any of the things I'm about to describe. I'm just broadening the topic a little bit to just talk about why people don't like generative AI. Because I think there's this misunderstanding among some people where they believe that people are just mad about AI for no reason, and there's no reason to be upset about generative AI. It's just a tool, and I think there's a broader context here that I would just like to shed some light on. So I'm about to talk about some other companies and how they have kind of trained their AI, so we can kind of just be all on the same page about this. SAG-AFTRA members have been going on strike against video game employers since July of 2024 now. And a big part of why they went on strike is finding common ground for certain contract terms surrounding AI proposals and video game companies wanting to turn to AI. It's worth noting that EA is a struck company in this. And while SAG-AFTRA have not asked for an official boycott of any of these struck companies, in fact, they've asked creators and streamers to continue to play the games that they love and continue to make videos and stream content about game they love, but just to support the SAG-AFTRA members and kind of uplift their voices in what they're asking for. You know, they are workers just like the rest of us. They bring an important performance to these video games that companies are ultimately just not wanting to care about workers in the way that they should. According to their latest update on this topic, which I'm going to link everything below in the description for SAG-AFTRA and all the other sources that I'm going to talk about in this video. According to their last update, companies want to use all past and any performances that were made outside of the contract without any of the protections that they're currently bargaining for. They specifically say they want to be able to make your replica continue to work as you do during a future strike, whether you like it or not. For obvious reasons, this is like super messed up and is just replacing workers, replacing actors, meaning that we don't have to actually pay our artists for their work. And to kind of explain more broadly why this generative AI thing is bad for artists, you kind of need to understand how generative AI is trained. You basically have to train the AI by feeding it content that already exists that's made by humans. And I'm simplifying this way down. So if you work in AI, you might not really like my description, but I think this is like a pretty decent way to explain it to people who maybe don't really know what's going on here. To tell an AI to make a flower, you first have to show it like a bunch of pictures of flowers. And all of those pictures of flowers might be paintings from, artists who sat there and painted it with their hands, or photographers who went and took that photo. And yes, there are copyright-free materials that you can kind of supposedly train these AIs with, but the way that this has worked in the past with certain companies like DALL-E, Midjourney, and OpenAI is that they might be fed artist work without any kind of consent from those artists, or especially the most important part, any kind of compensation. Image generators don't create images out of a void. They are trained on the labor of other people, and inherently generative AI is derivative of those things. And I'm not like a super big copyright person to begin with, but I do think that this is just important to mention, especially from the labor standpoint of why are we so cool with letting these companies profit off of people. Like, even if you don't care about artists because you think that it's like a fake career or something, you at the very least maybe could understand why it's kind of unfair that a big corporation can just get away with stealing a bunch of like non-copyright free work and then using it to train their AI model, and now all of that is copyright free even though it's all derivative. To me, this is like very clearly just a way of circumventing just having to pay actual employees in order to create a bigger profit margin. And we talk a lot about that aspect of it, of like writers and artists and voice actors and kind of how their work and their rights as workers are being maybe kind of infringed on by this AI thing. But I think another important part of this that we talk about way less is the way that a lot of these companies have documentedly kind of exploited certain other countries in order to train these models further. This has really impacted realities of workers in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So like ChatGPT was used with the entire internet just kind of uploaded to it to kind of simplify it. You cannot just upload the entirety of an internet into an AI and expect it to know the difference between, a cat or a dog or, a cat and the color yellow. It doesn't know any of that stuff until a human sits there and identifies what each and every image or each and every sound is. Generative AI is basically like a predictive algorithm. It just predicts the most likely kind of next thing. And so if human has to go through and label all these images, all these snippets of text, and these American companies haven't hired American workers to do so. This article, Behind the AI Boom, an Army of Overseas Workers in Digital Workshops by the Washington Post, describes a situation in which more than 2 million people in the Philippines do this kind of work, Romotasks is a platform owned by a San Francisco company, Scale AI. And Scale AI's use of Romotasks is kind of like DoorDash or like Uber Eats for AI training. That's the best way I can describe it. They're contractors, so they're not actually protected in any significant kind of way. And in the article, Filipino government officials say that they are alarmed by the working conditions that these people are put through, but they also go on to say that they don't know how to even begin to regulate it. Multiple workers report experiencing delayed, reduced, or canceled payments with Romotasks, earning far below minimum wage in the Philippines, ranging from $6 to $10 a day. To give an example of how this plays out, one example in this specific article is a 26-year-old named Jackie who spent 3 days on something he understood would earn him $50, only to be paid $12 by the end of it. Or Ben's, a 36-year-old who was meant to be paid out $150 worth of payments, and then they banned him off the platform altogether and he never saw a cent of that money. And these are American companies who are hiring people overseas where minimum wage is lower so that they can pay people less. And then even then, they're not even paying out the bare minimum there. Scale AI, the owner of Romotasks, does work for Meta, Microsoft, OpenAI, just to like name a few. Like those are big American companies. This article talking about workers in Cagayan de Oro is far from the only or most horrifying instance of this. And this gets even darker. OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, had to build a model that was meant to moderate and cut out the horrifically racist, sexist, and violent stuff that ChatGPT's predecessor, GPT-3, often just like spewed since it was trained on, the vastness of the internet. And to do this, they worked with a company called Sama, a company that ironically claims itself to be an ethical AI company, which is crazy because what I'm about to describe does not sound ethical to me at all. So they're feeding this moderation with the hate speech, the sexual abuse, with labels to kind of moderate these out and have more accurate explanations that didn't just like randomly devolve into right-wing nonsense. And they sent it all to this outsourcing firm. And this outsourcing firm sent hundreds of snippets to label to firms in Kenya, Uganda, India, where these workers were reportedly paid between $1.32 and $2 an hour. And the author of this article, Billy Perigeo, described the text as grim. And to kind of give you an idea of the morale of these workers, here is a quote: "You're reading this content day in, day out, over the course of days and weeks and months. It seeps into your brain and you can't get rid of it." The workers described feeling traumatized, how visions would come to them depicting these like very illegal acts that they had read vividly described by a lot of these texts. They were reportedly expected to read and label 150 to 250 snippets of text over 9-hour shifts. These snippets ranged from like 100 words to over 1,000. And Samas's work with OpenAI was cut short after Samas took on a project for OpenAI involving these toxicity ratings, except with photos. And my understanding of events is that Samas was asked to collect and categorize these photos on some kind of communication with OpenAI outside of their initial agreement. And OpenAI claimed that this was just like a misunderstanding. But nonetheless, these workers ended up collecting, labeling, and sending OpenAI over 1,400 images with content labels, including labels that are illegal under US law. And shortly thereafter, they ended its contract with OpenAI 8 months earlier than originally agreed. So that is what we are talking about when we talk about the unethical workers' rights involved here. It's not just artists not being paid, it's also this kind of exploitation by a lot of these companies of workers in the global south. And so that's the backdrop for why people are upset about generative AI. And once again, I don't claim to know how Crafton trains their AI. They claim that it's ethical, they claim that it's all copyright free, but I kind of had dual purpose here. I wanted to bring this broader conversation up because I think it's important and we don't talk about it far enough, and this was just a good bridge and excuse in order for me to kind of inform more people about what's happening with generative AI and why people don't like it. And two, I think it's just important to understand why people maybe got so knee-jerk upset when they heard that Crafton had generative AI. And once again, everything is in the description. I implore you to read these articles, read these testimonies of these people. And if you don't care about the workers' ethics of it all, there's also like this big environmental issue with AI, which makes it super concerning that like everything is adopting AI in this kind of like trendy we're gonna put generative AI at the top of a Google search for some reason, despite the fact that it uses like 5 times the energy as a normal Google search. Generative AI needs an enormous amount of fresh water to cool processors, and a lawsuit in West Des Moines, Iowa by local residents revealed that in July 2020 that OpenAI used 6% of the district's water. As Google and Microsoft prepared their language models, there were spikes in water use like 20 and 34% in just like 1 year. The demand for water could be half of the United Kingdom by 2027, which is like not that far away. We're in 2025. There's currently the Artificial Intelligence and Environmental Impacts Act of 2024, and the last update I can find for it on Congress's website is from February 1st, 2024, where it was read twice and referred to the Committee of Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and the bill has been introduced. And it's just stuck at introduced. You know, they certainly could optimize these things in order to use less energy. So I don't know. This stuff hasn't been optimized to use less energy yet. And that is just super problematic for environmental reasons, obviously. You know, all this use of fresh water, all this use of energy. Google giving me a summary at the top of my page about what I'm Googling when a normal Google search used to suffice. And so this introduction of generative AI into video games is just concerning to me on that level too. I also think that generative AI just kind of makes for bad games. Games are obviously capable of being bad without Games are obviously capable of being bad without AI. Of course, like, I'm looking at you, EA. I think the biggest example of this that I have seen lately is City Skylines 2 and their use of this program called Populate. Populate is a tool that uses generative AI to generate a large number of unique characters based off a base model. So you upload like a base mesh and they'll make a bunch of characters that all fit within the art style of your game. And I think two things can be true at once. I think that outside of the environmental concerns, this is actually like a pretty cool concept to kind of streamline the process of making a game. And two, as an artist, it makes me sad to think of all the ways that artists are just kind of being cut out of the process of creating games, and all of the artists that have been inevitably replaced by programs like this. With Cities 2 especially, there was some interesting speculation that happened where each civ was rendered with individual teeth, without any LODs. If you don't know what allotted, it stands for level of detail, and it basically means that the more points there are in something, the harder your computer has to work in order to render it. And if something is zoomed far away from you, it needs less detail. If you're not looking right at it, there's no reason to like high def render my whole face, for example. You could kind of make it into like a couple different dots and a couple different planes and make it a lot easier on your computer to render, and therefore a lot easier to run the game. And Cities 2 like notoriously had like a really bad issue where it was just horrible to run. The devs supposedly like debunked this as having major impacts on performance, but then what's so interesting is the article where they debunk this, they basically confirm it, in my opinion. Like, in the article, they admit that the game was shipped without LODs and that was impacting performance, but then go on to be like, but the teeth aren't the problem. And some even speculated that these civs all had these detailed faces because of some future competitor to The Sims. I told you, this like all goes full circle, which that's just speculation, but I do think there is a little side tangent here about another reason that people speculated these civs have had individual teeth was to make way for kind of dentistry industry DLC. I don't know, this sounds an awful lot like something EA does, at least. And inzoi has been criticized for bad performance as well. I don't know that this AI thing has anything to do with it. I just did find that an interesting parallel while I was kind of writing my script for this video. I know I've been on the AI topic for a minute, but one last thing is that there's this conflation between generative AI and just like normal artificial intelligence. AI has been being used way longer than generative AI has. You know, if you think about it, the YouTube algorithm in a way is an AI. And like the entire free will systems of The Sims hinges on artificial intelligence, obviously. And EA has talked about, you know, a supercharged discovery tool that is not generative AI from the sounds of it, but a lot of people are conflating and saying that it is. It's more like reverse image search, which we've had with Google like forever. And I, for the record, still absolutely loathe the sound of this. If you're not aware, EA basically was like, we want to make it so you can upload an image of your face or your house and it'll pull up a sim from the gallery that looks like you, or a house on the gallery that looks like the image that you uploaded. And I hate this as a concept like almost as much as I hate the generative AI thing as a concept. There's just privacy concerns there. What are they doing with the images? If somebody takes an image of you without your consent and uploads it and gives it to EA, like what are they doing with that? Especially when you consider that a lot of the people who play The Sims are minors. I don't think that this is like a good idea to be feeding a company images. And I also am completely speculating here, but I worry that maybe EA is collecting these images in order to train an AI, potentially. They said that this was happening soon, like 5 months ago, so I'm just hoping that EA forgot that they said that they were gonna do this, and they just don't, because it sounds horrific, and I really truly do hate this as a concept. But to bring it all back to inzoi, I have been on a tangent for a minute now. They've really started the marketing for their game with kind of this influencer marketing thing that EA does that I hate. For example, due to its horrible performance on lower end systems and its need for these really high end systems as just like basic requirements to play the game to begin with, a lot of people who had early access back several months ago were sent like multiple $1,000 PCs. We're talking about PCs that are worth more than I've made in my entire time here on YouTube. Like, nothing to scoff at. I'm not here to shit on creators getting their bag. Like, just because I have punk guilt doesn't mean that other creators aren't allowed to make money. And it doesn't make me better than everyone else. It just means that I am pretentious and broke. But I think that the reason I wanted to make this whole video to begin with and explain why I'm choosing not to play inzoi right this second is because I think that there is this big conversation about the parasocial relationship and this paid review that have kind of popped up in the life simulation space on EA's behalf, even if the creator is not paid by the company directly through a traditional sponsorship. Do not generally do reviews unless I am excited about the thing that is coming out genuinely. I did one for The Sims 2, I'll probably do one for The Sims 4 Bands if that ever comes to fruition, and who knows, maybe in the future I will do one for inzoi when I feel like my concerns have kind of been addressed after the game has been out for a while. But as a principle, I do not upload videos same day reviewing Sims 4 packs or new content, despite how much videos like that would grow my channel pretty significantly. The Sims 2 video is a great example of this. There's something to be said about when you upload something very timely or even in early access, it gives you this giant boost in viewership for it to be that topical kind of timely content. Again, I want to make it really clear that I'm talking about how I don't like the EA Creator Network and I don't like this strategy that inzoi is taking for, marketing their game. But I also want to make it super clear that if anybody comments talking badly about any Sims creator, no matter how big they are, I will delete it. I don't think that's a productive way to have this conversation through fostering a toxic kind of call-out community in my comment section. These are just people making a living, and I probably even enjoy the content of some of the biggest names that could be brought up in this topic, and I'm sick of a certain toxic critique culture in The Sims 4 that kind of equivocates a Sims influencer with a $35 billion company. And we're talking billion with a B. Like, EA is so big. This is not equivalent to somebody sitting in their YouTube video turning out videos about the newest Sims 4 pack. No matter how many Sims 4 pack videos you make and how optimized your content strategy is, $35 billion. But yeah, I'm not here for the idea that they're one and the same. They're just not. My big issue with the EA Creator Network is that EA does not like it if you don't play nice. Like, Lazy Game Reviews is one of the only OG people who still makes critical reviews of The Sims 4 and no longer receives early access to the packs. To my knowledge, at the time of recording this, maybe that has been reversed. But there is a reason that this early access scheme works so well. And there's a reason that inzoi has been doing it and has been targeting specifically the Sims community in order to kind of create an audience for their life simulators. The early access scheme is an incredibly effective marketing strategy. Otherwise, EA wouldn't do it, and inzoi wouldn't have tagged along and tried to do it as well. When you have early access to a game and you're making content on it before anyone else is able to access the game, you're obviously going to receive a lot more attention on your video. It's going to long-term grow your channel. So we're not just talking about like one video doing better. We're talking about a repeated pattern of having early access is going to make it so that people return to your channel time after time and maybe watch your other content, and then it grows your whole audience and your whole channel. And once again, I am not critiquing any of the creators who participate in this. It used to be like my dream to be in the EA Creator Network, or Game Changer program was what it was called when I was kind of daydreaming about this around cats and dogs when I was like a teenager. It's sad to have your dreams like crushed. And there's still a level of benefit that creators get for making videos with early access to inzoi or to Sims 4 packs or any other kind of game. You know, there is a reason the FTC requires those YouTubers to disclose at the front of their video that it was early access. Like, the FTC wouldn't require that if it was not some kind of equivalent monetary benefit for the creator in early access as a traditional sponsor. And like I said, this video honestly critiques EA more than it does inzoi or Crafton. But I think just knowing how this works in the Sims community and how these kind of marketing schemes have worked with the Sims community, it does make me really trepidatious about kind of jumping on this like influencer bandwagon of like, ooh, we're all gonna play inzoi and talk about it, how it's so much better to The Sims. Like, especially when I'm not morally stoked about the generative AI stuff and the use of generative AI and the normalization of it. I would personally prefer them to just hire actual artists to make more patterns rather than, you know, create an in-game AI that can do whatever pattern you want it to do. In editing here, I don't think I did a very good job of explaining when I recorded this about why this generative AI thing is such a sticking point for me, despite the fact that inzoi claims that they use all copyright-free and ethically sourced material. Stuff uploaded to the internet still does retain copyright, but despite that, many companies have skirted around that and utilized just like stuff on the internet in order to train their models and then claiming that it's all copyright free. I'm not saying inzoi is lying. I don't care to catch a lawsuit. I think it requires so much data in order to train a model. I have a very hard time believing that they could train a really thorough model without a ton of information, that it would honestly just be more cost effective to just hire workers to do the work in the first place. Like, if you really think about it, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would they have an AI when they're still having to pay those artists to make the images that they're about to train the AI on? Why wouldn't they just have the artists make the thing that the AI is gonna make? Or if you're going to say they probably got stock images or whatever, stock images still cost money if businesses are going to use them to make money off of them. Even if I were to put a stock photo in this video and I am going to monetize this video on YouTube, it would be really hard for me to find something that's truly free. And I think on the internet, a lot of people skirt around copyright law. And as I said earlier, I'm not even the biggest copyright diehard person either. I think that there's tons of cases on the internet where something's absolutely fair use and it sucks because it gets copyright striked here on YouTube or whatever. And I think that's a load of BS, to be completely honest. Yeah, that is why this is such a sticking point for me, is I just don't completely buy it. Their story doesn't completely make sense to me. I understand that there's a theoretical world where this is all ethical. I just do not understand how that's possible personally. I don't know. And once again, this is my opinion. I don't want to get in trouble. I think for the rest of the video, I mention it kind of more of like, oh, this little issue that I have, but this is a very big issue for me. Crafton has made AI such a big part of their identity, like even outside of inzoi, that it is incredibly concerning to me. Like, if you go to their website, they're very open about being a AI company. Yeah, Crafton AI utilizes deep learning technology to enhance the immersion and enjoyment of our games. There's a section of their website called Crafton AI where it basically just outlines how big they consider AI to be in their game development process. Like, for fuck's sake, they have a AI virtual friend. Our goal is to build a personalized virtual friend that can engage in close interactions with the player as they play a game. Virtual friends can be humanoid, animal-like, or more, and can exchange realistic and natural interactions with the player. Like, they want to make AI influencers. There's literally a section, live and interaction virtual influencer. Our goal is to build an influencer that can interact with viewers during live stream media. We will use various deep learning technologies during the stream to provide viewers with a new dimension of fun. Our goal is to embed deep learning technology in the process used to develop video games, reducing production times, aka reducing people that we have to pay to make our game. And they say this technology is closest to Crafton's core drive as a game developer and maker of masterpieces. I have a whole ethical AI section on this page. You can read it if you go to my description if you're curious. I'm not even gonna bother to read it here because in my opinion, when any company has a whole section about their ethics, it's like a load of bullshit. Like, I don't know a nicer way to phrase it or how to be more diplomatic on that. And yeah, I think I needed to insert this because I think I did a very bad job at explaining how core the AI thing is. It's not just like this one little thing in the game that you can just ignore. It's the basis for their entire model as a video game development company. And EA has said some similar stuff about like AI being core to their development process. I think from what I know about inzoi, they have been pretty responsive to what the community has kind of expressed concerns over. And I think that that's cool, and that's more than EA can say for sure. I know for a brief moment in time, there was this controversy around whether you could be gay in the game. And from my understanding, they've really worked on that, and now there's even options to be non-binary, which I think is cool, and I think it's good that they're being responsive to their community. And in that way, I'm actually sad that I don't really feel like I can play this game right now, but because I am super curious about it, and it does sound like the developers are doing something really cool, and I am excited about a competitor to the Sims franchise. And I know that I'm talking about this through comparing it to EA and The Sims, and then there might be this question of like, well, then why do you still play The Sims? I'm playing The Sims because I bought The Sims in 2014 when I was a child, and like I said, I've kind of grown up on this franchise, and I do feel a kind of connection to it, and I like to play it. And like I said, I'm not completely saying that I'll never play inzoi. I honestly, like I said, I'm very curious to. I just worry about jumping on this new shiny thing and then promoting it to an audience of people, and them maybe not thinking critically about why all these creators are hyping up this thing at one time. And especially with some of these creators, you know, having received things like entire PCs and not disclosing that to their audience. I don't know if any of that reasoning made like any sense to anyone else but me, but TLDR is I just essentially feel like right now just isn't the right time for me specifically to make videos on it. And as much as I do want to check it out, especially because the generative AI stuff is becoming such a hard thing to navigate, I used to think on principle, if anything, use generative AI, I just wouldn't use it. And that is becoming like increasingly impossible as every single platform is now kind of incorporating AI summaries into like YouTube is using AI summaries. I recently experimented with YouTube's own summary of my freaking video, and can I tell you, that is creepy, and I honestly don't love that either, but I don't feel like I have much of a choice. So there is a part of my brain that is like, well, everything else is using AI, so why are you standing on this moral high ground for inzoi? But then when you incorporate this kind of influencer marketing scheme that they're doing, I don't know. I just feel a bit trepidatious to hop on the bandwagon per se. And I don't know, maybe some people will think that this video is just full of excuses, and I could see how you could kind of see it that way. I mainly wanted to make this video just to kind of shed some light on these broader conversations, not really even about inzoi that I talked about in this video. So if I'm being honest, I honestly just mainly wanted to trick you all into caring about labor rights and the environment for like a second. I think I would love to talk about these more broad topics on this channel more often, and if you enjoyed this conversation, please let me know in the comments below. Everything is political, and I think video games are no exception to it, and I think the least that I can do with this channel is to just kind of shed some light on some stuff that maybe some other people aren't talking about as broadly. So thank you for watching, I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.